Hello and welcome to the last word on Spurs. We do hope you're keeping very, very safe and well. Thank you so much for joining us. As yet, we are here again. It's one of our summer transfer window specials here on Last Word on Spurs. If you're listening to the show for the first time, you can find us on iTunes, we're on Spotify, across all major audio platforms. We're, of course, on Twitter at Last Word on Spurs. We're on Facebook and Instagram too. And look, I am beaming a little bit of a smile because it does feel like things are beginning slowly to maybe heat up. Maybe I'm being excited. Maybe I'm being optimistic rather than pessimistic. But a man that's going to help me break it all down tonight. Look, he's been on Last Word on Spurs before. He is back once again. We've got the wonderful chief sports writer, of course, for the Sun Football. We've got Martin Lipton back with us. Martin, love to have you on Last Word on Spurs. Even you're smiling. What's going on?
Well, everyone has to smile occasionally. It saves you coping with the pain, doesn't it? We've had enough of that. And I think the last few weeks have been testing. That's an understatement, really, for any Tottenham supporter. It's been a tough few weeks for a variety of reasons, which we'll get through. But perhaps there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah,
we're about to find out.
It's true. I mean, I think many were billing it as potentially a really difficult week in the life of supporting Tottenham Hotspur. But look, I think it's fair to say, Martin, I'm going to make you feel young here. Me and you have been through a lot as Spurs fans already. So, I mean, what else could
more than you?
I was trying to make you feel young then. What else could age us? I was going to say in these coming weeks to come at Tottenham, of course. Look, nothing short of the captain looking to leave the football club. The potential new captain in Harry Kane looking also to angle a move. However, it's been a quieter week so far than one we may think of. But that's the beauty of when we are doing these shows, that so much can change, as we know, during a transfer window. So you can never hedge your bets too far. And on the word of Harry, we will be talking about Harry later in the show. I just want to say, of course, Matt Hayes was due to join us tonight. And this is going to sound a really, really corny, funny story. That doesn't sound true. But believe me, when I do say Matt's dog did eat his Wi-Fi cable. And that's why Matt is not here. It sounds like the worst excuse to get out of doing your homework. Or it sounds like the worst excuse to try and get out doing a live show. But yes,
anything to avoid talking to me, I think it's fair enough. I can't blame him for that.
Well, it could be anything to avoid talking Tottenham, to be honest with you, at the moment. It's a difficult subject. But what I will say in Matt's company is, Matt let me know about 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock this morning before all this news broke. Now, I wonder if Matt was frantically going to try and get his router in place now. Once it does appear, Spurs are finally getting on the move during, of course, this summer transfer window. Look, we've got a lot to discuss. All the players that have been linked, of course, we're going to bring on to, and I'm sure Martin's going to offer us a great opinion piece on a lot of what's going on about Tottenham. But look, let's rewind the clock a little bit, Martin. Spurs do have a new manager. He was handed a 4-year deal, Ange Postecoglou. I'm really intrigued to know what you've made of the man so far in terms of the couple of press conferences we've seen, the way he's handled the internal communication at Tottenham. Early thoughts of Ange Postecoglou?
I've actually been pretty impressed about the way he's gone around things. I think it's been a bit of a crash course in Tottenham for him, which no matter where you've been before, there's no basket case like our basket case. And he's had to come to terms with that quite swiftly over the last few weeks. I mean, it wasn't ideal at all, the preparation. Obviously, losing one of the 2 games, of one of the 3 games rather, in the Far East, or Australia in the Far East. And then playing a Mickey Mouse team in the third one, so he got nowhere like the sort of preparation he was wanting. But what is clear already is that they're going to try and play to win matches, as opposed to trying to play not to lose matches. And after the turgid tripe that's been dished up for much of the last 3 or 4 years, I think that will be a breath of fresh air for just about everyone. And I think that if there's ambition in the way the team plays, there'll be far more leeway and latitude for a manager over whom there must be some doubt, just because no one really knows a lot about him. In the same way that there were huge doubts when he came in at Celtic and transformed everything overnight. Now, I'm not going to say he'll transform everything, but I do think his track record suggests that there's something there. And there will be a way of playing that will at least be progressive and exciting and vibrant, and may not always work. But I'd rather fail because of too much ambition than fail because of too little. And that's, I think, where we have been certainly last season. And the other thing, I can't believe there's any way in which Postecoglou will deliberately and determinedly blow up the club, as Conte did last March.
It's an interesting point, Martin, you raised there about Conte. I just wonder from what you hear behind the scenes at Tottenham, how much of a rebuild job is Postecoglou walking into in terms of that squad? You know, we've had a lot from Christian Romero, of course, when he was obviously at the, of course, on pre-season, where he said when he came out from the World Cup, he came into a dressing room which was really, really divided. You know, you had players there, some were playing for the manager, some wasn't. I don't know whether you can maybe give us an idea of just behind the scenes, how big a job do you think Postecoglou is walking into to just get that squad back into some form of unity?
Well, I think what you've got to remember is that footballers are very adaptable and can change their mentality quite quickly if they have proper leadership. And they want a manager who they think is on their side, who isn't looking to divide them amongst themselves, who is trying to progress and improve, and isn't all about himself. Now, I think it was pretty clear by the end with Conte that the only person he cared about was Antonio Conte. Now, a bit of it I understood. I think if he'd gone to the club in February and said, look, I'm really sorry, but given what's happened with the deaths of 3 of my closest friends before their time, in case of 2 of them, and me wondering where I'm going to be and what about my health and my family, and I just can't do this anymore, and I'm really sorry, and can we agree an exit and let me move on with my life? I don't think anyone would have complained. It would have been unfortunate and difficult, but it would have been something you could deal with. The fact that he then deliberately, literally threw a hand grenade in the middle of the dressing room, as he did it, well, not literally, but metaphorically, at Southampton, destabilising everything and taking a team that should have finished 3rd into the 8th place they deserved, which is what happened as a consequence of his behaviour. That was just awful and unacceptable. And I think it was, demeaning of him as a man and a manager, actually. Look, it would have been difficult to do a deal with Daniel. We know that, crikey. But I think if it'd been handled properly, that a deal could have been done and some sort of agreement could have been made. Instead, Conte just wanted to take the club for every penny he could get. And I think that was unnecessary, personally. And I don't blame him feeling that I don't want to be here anymore. I want to be back home in Italy. That's perfectly understandable and valid. It's the way he went about it. So Postecoglou is having to pick up the pieces, and not just of that manager's reign, but also the short-lived Stellini reign and the problems that Ryan Mason had and other things going on. And it wouldn't have been easy. But when you come in with someone with a clearly fresh mindset, a clearly different mental attitude, and it would appear at least with some power in terms of who he gets in, because the first month or so of the window, first few weeks, it looks as though it was really positive with the players that were brought in. I think it gives you a chance to heal those wounds quite swiftly. What you do need to have then is consistency and a certainty and a sense that the manager is being backed. And perhaps we might get that now. I think it's a bit overdue, and I'd like to have seen the signings which we think are going to be made earlier. And I definitely would like to have seen a few more go earlier. But maybe that's just the way it works these days, and you have to delay and do it in the last few weeks when players suddenly recognise that they're not wanted. But I think from what we've seen of Postecoglou, what I've heard from him, and what I've heard more, I guess, usefully from me, from people who've been around Tottenham over the last few weeks, is that he is the real deal and he will make a difference, and he can be a very good manager as long as he's allowed to be a project manager and doesn't have to get it right in the first 3 weeks, because that's not how football works.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. Look,
By the way, it's absolutely throwing down up here, so that's what you can hear is the rain on the skylight over there. Sorry about that.
That's absolutely fine, no problem at all. Absolutely fine, no worries. It's funny because you're going to get more rain from this end, so we're both in between us. It's going to sound like an absolute hailing for our viewers and listeners here. Over 1,000 of you already watching us live across all our platforms. Thank you so much for your support. Joanne says, Martin Lipton with a T. Martin, she spotted you with a cuppa potentially there in the background. What I do want to ask you about is, look, Scott Munn, of course, the new chief footballing officer, who was, of course, due to start around the same time as, or if not the same day as Ange Postecoglou. We know, obviously, for whatever reason, that start date has been pushed back. It's delayed. There was talk that he has been seen in the round, of course, Spurs' pre-season tour, of course, to Thailand, Singapore. I wonder, from your perspective, again, and knowing the club like you have done in the case of so many years, whether you feel, of course, he had a major influence, Scott Munn, and this is what I'm asking you, do you feel in the appointment of Postecoglou, and whether we will see Daniel relinquish some degree of control now over the club, give that to Scott so they can work in tandem himself and Postecoglou from obviously the experience they've known from each other working together?
Well, theoretically, that's the idea. But theory and practice are often divergent bedfellows, aren't they? And I think it's fair to say, from what we all know about Daniel Levy over 22 years at the club, he likes to be hands-on. It's in his nature. Now, there needs to be demarcation lines, I think, and that's harder if Munn isn't actually in position at the moment. And he seems to be sort of on the edges, on the margins, but not actually in place for whatever reason. There may be some sort of issue with gardening leave from Citigroup and things like that. So eventually, once he comes in, which hopefully be sooner rather than later, those demarcation lines can be put down. And then, Daniel's job should be running the club, the institution, as a chief executive and chairman, which is what he is. I mean, he's a big fish, and being Tottenham's voice at the top table within the Premier League and European Club Association and UEFA and all of these bodies, and for Scott Munn to be the go-between between the manager and the club on the football side. And that isn't always saying yes, because you don't just say yes to every manager, but it's explaining rationally why you're saying no, or offering alternative options. And if that works, where the manager has trust in the intermediary, Daniel lets Munn do his job, then you should have a cohesive unit running all sides of the operation. But that's the theory, and what's the reality? We don't quite know that yet. And until the third part of the triumvirate's in place and we see how that works, we don't know. And it would be wrong to say one thing or the other, because literally we do not know how it will work. I suspect that, brewed somewhat, I think, by some of the criticism that's come his way, Daniel might wish to take a slight, and I mean slight, step away and concentrate on the things he's good at. But that's just my intimation and hunch, and I might be entirely wrong. And I don't want to be unequivocal about it, because that would be foolish.
You brought it up there, Martin. It'd be I feel for me, I have to ask you this question, because again, you've been in and around Tottenham, and obviously you've supported them for all your life, and you've seen a lot of different things happen at the football club.
You can tell by the worry lines, can't you? I'm actually 24.
Well, I won't ask you how many managers you've seen off or you've seen around Tottenham, because we could be here for a very, very long time. That's before we get started on the players.
Well, I started with Bill Nicholson, so that shows how far we go back. I remember when he quit, and I was stunned by that, and that was 39 years ago. No, 49 years ago. This
is the problem, isn't it? The trajectory of where you was to where it's going at the moment. Look, please God, we'll get back there for sure. But I just wonder, this is probably, I would say, the most testing time Daniel has had as the chairman of the football club. I would love to know from you, just a personal opinion, whether you feel Daniel will be able to ride this tide out and essentially try and win back what seems like now very, very loud dissenting voices with fans. There's a lot going on with Tottenham. We've got obviously a potential or upcoming protest, or should I say demonstration, with relation to ticket prices being hiked. There's been, of course, frustration during this transfer window. More has not been done. There is still a chance, of course, we're going to come on to him later in the show, Harry Kane, Tottenham's poster boy, arguably for some of the greatest ever player, maybe leaving this football club during this transfer window. I'd love to know your opinion on Daniel Levy, and if you feel there is still a way he can win back a percentage of supporters to, you would say, at least be, I would, again, in that stadium, you'd say comfortable, because let's be honest about it, towards the end of that season, it was anything but that.
Yeah, it was. I think if you go back, even before I was born, Harold Macmillan was asked, what's the biggest issue in politics? And he said, events, dear boy, events. And I think it's the same in football. We have 29 days as we sit here till the close of the window. If by the close of the window in 29 days, Harry Kane is still at Spurs, they've signed 2 centre-backs, an extra midfielder and another striker, and people look at the squad and he's got rid of 6 or 7 players who don't really have a future at the club, and they've all gone, and people will say, well, he made a bit of a faff of it, but actually we've done quite well. And 3 months later, Harry Kane signs a new contract for 5 years, then there's no issue at all. It's like the only problem now is let's sort out the ticket prices or issues about that, and let's maybe have better communication between the club and the supporters, but basically everything's going well. If things go well on the pitch, issues aren't as big, even if they remain exactly the same, because the focus is always the pitch. And if the team is doing well, people are less likely to get angry about other things. They'll still be angry, but they'll be less angry because they've got something to balm the wounds, which is the football and the way the team are playing. And I think that remains the case for any club chair, and particularly one who is as very much the person who runs the club as Daniel Levy is. For good or ill, Daniel Levy has run Tottenham Hotspur for 22 years. Now, many will say, well, we haven't won. We've only won one trophy in his tenure. It's simply not good enough for a club of this size. But I remember the club that he took over in 2001 and the shambles that club was. And the reality that we were, as a club, they were trying to compete with antiquated, much loved, but antiquated facilities. Now you look at what the club has built off the pitch, and there's no question that we have a fantastic stadium, an outstanding world-class training ground, everything state of the art. So the building blocks, the foundation stones, all of that are in place. But unless you actually build the building and put some gold on the roof and silverware on the chimney, no one's going to be happy. That's the reality of football. So it is difficult for Daniel at the moment, unquestionably. It's been uncomfortable for him. I suspect this summer has been, the last few weeks actually, have been more uncomfortable than the first few weeks were, because there wasn't that much criticism at the start of the season, at the start of the window, really, was there? There didn't seem to be any of this turmoil about Kane. It appeared to be, got a new manager in. He appeared to be backing him. There were players coming in that people were impressed with. And then it changed because we've had a sort of 6-week fallow period in which there seems to be an inertia at best, and maybe even the club going backwards at worst. And that has been difficult, but it is still soluble. But we wouldn't. The proof of that will come in over 29 days. You've gone silent on me, Ricky, so I can't hear you.
I'm here. Thank you very much. And that's what I'm going to ask you about next. Of course, this where we are in this transfer window now. And we mentioned that point that with Spurs, things had at the beginning initially looked like they were really picking up. We, of course, saw the deals being done for Guillermo Vicario, James Maddison, Manor Solomon, all signing on the dotted line, along with Dejan Kulusevski joining permanently. I understand Spurs also triggered that loan option for Pedro Porro. And I think it's fair to say that in these last 2-3 weeks, there has been real frustration from Spurs fans about just how quiet it has gone. Because I think, again, when you look at the glaring deficiencies Spurs have had and do still need to address, centre-back, one we're going to come on to very, very shortly, and it appears one that looks like it is now starting once again to progress, but we have been here before. So, again, we don't want to get too carried away. Obviously, just the one outgoing so far in terms of Harry Winks. So, you know, Spurs, they took 31 players on that summer tour. It's unthinkable to think the window could close right now and you'd have so many of those players remaining when you've given the fact Spurs don't have, of course, European football, and they need to make that squad competitive. So if I was to ask you at the moment to summarise how you feel about Spurs' window, and I know you're going to say to me, look, we've still got a number of days to go. If I was to ask you right now and that window closed, how would you feel at the moment about it?
If it closed now, I'd be really disappointed. Even though I think the signings that made were really positive. But unless you sort out the glaring issue, which has got so many bells around its neck that it's actually deafening, and you might get a Noise Abatement Society public notice on it, then it will be a huge disappointment and a huge problem. Because without two proper centre-halves, this club will not improve. Because you can't, no matter how much attacking, vibrant football you try and play and front foot football, if the back door's left wide open, you're going to lose. And clearly, there needs to be depth and options at centre half. You can't just get away with two. Look, Spurs were really lucky they got away for a couple of seasons effectively with Alderweireld and Vertonghen. But that's unlikely. Look at them to Arsenal last year, don't mention their name, when Saliba got injured. They were going to win the league. He gets injured and they fell apart. Liverpool aren't the same because Van Dijk isn't Van Dijk, I don't think, anymore. And I think that will become increasingly apparent this year. Look how deep he has to defend now compared to the high line he used to keep. You've got to have those critical areas filled. Now, Romero has lots of talent, but I was very disappointed with his attitude basically all season, but particularly after the World Cup. I just don't think he cared last season. I know he said other than that, but that's the way it came across to me. I thought he was slipshod in his attitude, and he needs someone to make him want to do it. But I also thought that whoever you played alongside him, none of them were quite up to the task. The best of them was Longley. And if Longley came back as first choice, which I don't think is going to happen for a variety of reasons, there would be profound disappointment. If he were to come back as number 4 centre-half, you could probably just about accept that. So that if they've got to rectify that issue, and if they don't, nobody will be happy. It's as simple as that. And I want to see it done now. I want to see it done by this weekend. I want to see him at least have a full week training with one of these centre-halves, if not both. You can get, if you get the second one in after the season opens, that's okay. But you've got to get the first one in before. Because if we go into Brentford, even without Tony, with Romero and Davis at centre-half, and we lose the game, it's going to be toxic when they play Manchester United a week later. It just will be.
Yeah,
there's no doubt around that. So therefore, that central defensive signing is hugely important for everyone, including the manager.
And again, I agree with you, especially when I think you add to the point that, of course, we know for that Man United game, there is going to be a form of a demonstration beforehand due to, as we've said at the start of the show, the price ticket hike of those match day tickets. You know what? You make a really good point there, Martin, that one I was going to ask you about. And this is the thing, isn't it? You know, I've said about Vicario that he might not have been my number one choice, but will be behind him. To me, he looks a lot like a project keeper. He's one that you have to give time to. He's going to need to really fill his way into the side. And that's, again, for me, been the biggest disappointment so far, is that the one glaring error that we know we need addressed this window is centre-backs. And to leave it as late as we are doing, where it seems that, granted, they appear, might be getting one on the move as we are recording here at the moment, but I just wonder how much of a disadvantage that is for someone like Vicario, new goalkeeper, coming into the club, new league, new language, new players, new system, new manager, and he's not really having an opportunity to really have an extensive period, not only just to play with the new defenders, whoever Spurs do bring in, but to even train with them. You know, we're talking about a system where it requires a real intensity, concentration. Does that worry you from that perspective, that the guy's only going to get, less than a fortnight to work with any potential new defender that walks through the door before a first game against Brentford, where they are highly skilled at set pieces, and you can bet your bottom dollar they'll be 100% on that first game with Vicario in goal, putting that ball under the crossbar, as we'll know, testing the goalkeeper. Is that a worry for you?
Actually, no, because you bought him for 3 to 4 years and maybe longer, not for one match. And yes, it may be an issue in the first couple of weeks, and you look back and think, I wish I got him in a couple of weeks earlier. But if the season's ambitions are determined by the performances in the first match, then it's not going to be a great season, is it? You know, it's going to be what they do in the other 37 games. So it would be wrong to go overboard saying that. I just think it would be utterly remiss not to get one in before the first game, whomever it might be. That's absolutely essential. And I don't think there's any way round. And if it doesn't happen, the indignation, even if they were to win at Brentford on the first game, will be rightful and justly apportioned towards the club, because the manager's made it clear he wants centre-halves in. He can't have said any more. And there's no excuse for not doing it whatsoever, given it was the evident and apparent biggest issue, I would say, in the entire squad for the last 18 months.
Yeah, agree. 100%. Well, again, you look at the goals conceded last season. I think I think it's within the bottom 6 of the goals conceded, and 3 of those sides got relegated, which tells you everything that you need to know, just how important that area is to address. Now, obviously, there's been wide reports about the area Spurs are looking to address this window. They've got the goalkeeper. It looks like they're working on centre halves. They've got their creative midfielder and James Maddison. From your perspective, Martin, from what maybe you hear, is there any kind of other positions we should keep an eye on between now and the deadline? Anything we should be surprised by in terms of positions, do you feel?
Look, it looks like Hoberg's going to go, which means you need another central midfielder. That's obvious. You can't afford to have three. Particularly, you've got to remember, we've got an African Cup of Nations coming in January. So that means Bissouma and Sarr would immediately be out of action for Tottenham for up to 6 weeks. So you've got to be aware of that and think about that. Obviously, we're going to start the season without Bentancur, although hopefully he'll be back relatively swiftly. So you need, if Hoberg does go, and it looks that way, then another central midfielder has to come in, unless they're going to be brave and go with some of the kids. But I can't see that. I don't think you're going to try and throw Devine in there. It would be a mistake. I think it'd be a bit too early and unfair on him, and let him develop. And I think ideally I'd have another striker in, just to have another, just in case, have one more.
And just for clarity, that is with Harry staying, Martin,
yes,
not with Harry going.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, look, if Kane goes, you've got to get forward, and none of them will score a goal. So let's just, for the moment, let's work on the basis that Kane doesn't go. If he does go, everything changes and everything gets thrown up in the air. But if we work on the basis that he stays for one more season or longer, then I would like one more striking option, because there are players there who I'm not convinced about in the squad, and there's players I think we have to get rid of. I shouldn't use we. That's was it Richie Benham said. There's no we in sport. They have to get rid of, because, as you say, there's too many. You only allow 25 players who are 21 and over 21 rather. So that's Premier League rules. It doesn't matter about UEFA. It's Premier League rules, and you've got to have a certain quota of homegrown players. It's a bit easier with Premier League homegrown than UEFA homegrown, but that's going to be an issue hopefully down the line, because their regulations are going to change in the next 18 months over what qualifies as homegrown because of an ongoing court case in Europe. So there has to be significant and judicious pruning, but there also has to be a balanced squad. And I think that's really going to be difficult. And also a couple of the players who may well have been surplus to requirements are now basically not able to be sold because they're injured. So even if you wanted to get rid of them, no one's going to take them in the short term. So therefore that part of the window balancing act becomes even more precarious and difficult.
It does indeed. What we are going to do, we are going to go for our first break of the show for our listeners on audio. We've got over 13 to 1,400 of you watching us live. Thank you so much for always your incredible support for Last Word on Spurs. We're joined by the brilliant Martin Lipton, back on Last Word on Spurs, back talking about Tottenham, where, look, we're affording ourselves to raise a little bit of a smile here. It appears things might be picking up, but look, we have been there before. We will most certainly be there again with this football club. And look, you touched upon it, Martin, as we did. The area which Spurs definitely need to address is, of course, centre-half. We're getting strong reports today. Fabrizio Romano confirming that he believes there's a deal close to reaching an agreement for Wolfsburg's Micky Van de Ven. It appears that deal might be in the final stages. And also there are reports Spurs are expected to launch a bid for Fulham defender Tosin Adarabioyo. We have also seen reports this evening Clement Longley is closing in on a move to Saudi Arabia. So do you think it's fair to say, Martin, the picture of the elusive centre-halves may become clearer in these next couple of days? What do you reckon?
Well, it feels that way, doesn't it? Mind you, I've had enough of false dawns. I just until it becomes real and actual, I don't want to go into too many hypotheticals, because you could look really, really stupid. And I look stupid enough at the best of times, as I'm sure we all agree. Nevertheless, I do think that there seems to be, from what I'm hearing, reading, picking up, vibes-wise, that there is movement on Van de Ven. Now, look, he's played 2 seasons in Germany, one full season and a little bit the previous season. He played a couple of seasons in the second division in Holland. So he's not vastly experienced, but he does look lightning quick, which is good. He's obviously naturally left-footed. He drives with the ball. Now, that may be a brave step too far in terms of coming out of position, because we know that Romero likes to drive with the ball. The difference appears to be that Romero will leave his foot in and get a booking, and Van de Ven won't get a booking, which might be quite useful, because we're going to lose Romero for 6 games through suspension, aren't we, every season, even without European football. So that would be a positive. He's a left side, which gives you natural balance if they can get that one in. We know that it seems closing in on the boy from Blackburn, although he's very young, and I think that might be get him in, look at him for 6 months or 3 months, send him out on loan for a season, so he might be available for next year. We've got the new left back Udogie, who's now back at, fully at Tottenham, having spent that year back on loan at Udinese. Looks quite aggressive and attacking. That's quite nice. Porro's quite aggressive and attacking. So you need someone to hold in front, because the fullbacks are going to invert and push on. That's going to be quite exciting to watch, but it might be a bit vulnerable. But yes, get in one at least centre half. Van de Ven could be the one. There's a lot of talk of Tapsoba, but again, he's another African player, and African players can be fantastic players, really intelligent football players. It's not a criticism, but you don't want 6 players going abroad in January for 6 weeks for the African Nations Cup. I think that will just be an issue for this season. And don't moan about the fact the only reason you can sign them is because they play for their country. That's why you're allowed to get them. So don't moan when they want to play for their country. They should be playing for their country, as far as I'm concerned. So we'll see how that pans out. I would like to have a second one in, because I don't think Tanganga's good enough, I'm afraid. I'd love him to be, but I don't think he is. Clearly, no one at the club fancies Joe Rodon. He's been there. He's been on the books for 4 years now and barely kicked. I think he had that game against Chelsea at the start, and I don't think I've really seen him much since. He's been on loan to various places, so they obviously don't want him. He has to go. A lot of the fans don't like Dyer. I think that Dyer's role will be that of a squad player, not a first team player. I think he's actually quite important in the squad as a human being, as a man, as a footballer, as an experienced head who will never let you down in terms of commitment and attitude. And maybe if he played fewer matches and was less exposed, he'd be a better player as well, because let's look back. He was outstanding for us for quite some time. And he's been at the club now, his first game was the first Pochettino game, wasn't it? I think it was. He scored against West Ham.
Of course, West Ham debut, yeah.
That was 14-15 season, wasn't it? It's a long time ago. I mean, it's 9 years. So he's actually had a very good career, but his mistakes every time he makes a mistake, it seems to be a goal, doesn't it? Certainly the last couple of seasons. And that hurts him, because I don't think last season I thought he had a very good start to the season and then started to make some significant mistakes. He got into the World Cup squad on the basis of how he was playing in September, October, I think. Yeah. And then his form sort of dropped off a cliff, unfortunately. But I don't think he'll go, because I think they actually want him to be a cornerstone of the squad, even if not necessarily a starter in the team. I mean, you look at across London at Chelsea, Azpilicueta, that sort of role at Chelsea last season, even though it was all falling apart, he was one of the few things that was consistent in terms of keeping the motivation of a difficult club together. And I think it's good to have a player who understands the meaning of the club, the essence of the club, and wants to do that. So I wouldn't necessarily get rid of him. And then you've got Ben Davies, who is an option left-sided, but he's better in a 3 than a 4 as a centre half. And if you wanted to play a 3 occasionally, that wouldn't be terrible, would it? If you had Davies at the left of the 3, or he can be cover for the left back again, because you're not going to play Udogie every game. So we'll just be sensible about how things change. But I do think what's clear is you need 2 in and 2 out minimum. And that's when they're having gone and not coming back.
Yeah, just on those two, because obviously you brought up the fact that it appears Spurs are also closing in on the signing of Ashley Phillips from Blackburn. There was some, I say backwards and forwards with this deal. It appears Spurs were very, very close to signing for $2 million at one point. It then now appears there was a clause in the contract which enabled Blackburn to maybe ask for a higher fee, but it now appears Spurs are going to get in for a cut price deal. Just so I got your opinion on this, Martin, the 2 centre backs you feel Spurs need to have, is that inclusive of Ashley Phillips, or is that Phillips in addition to 2?
No, 2 first-team fullbacks plus a project defender in Phillips. He's too young to look, unless he really is outstanding. And I don't know; I've never seen the boy play. Yeah, I remember it's hard to believe this. I remember way back when, 2009, watching a 17-year-old kid at Blackburn called Phil Jones outplaying Didier Drogba at his peak in a game, a 1-1 draw against Chelsea. And at 17, Jones was going to be the future. I've got to be honest, he looked fantastic. And he didn't become the player we all thought he was going to be. But at 17, he was ready to play in the Premier League. Now, at 19, another young boy at Blackburn, is he ready to play in the Premier League when he's never played in it? I'm not sure. That doesn't mean that he won't be, but I think it would be wrong to suggest he is straight away ready. It would be unfair on him, and he needs to learn. He needs to play alongside proper players and train alongside them, learn the system and find a way to become as good as he can be, so that at 2021, he might be ready to start in the Premier League. But I wouldn't want to have him under that pressure now.
Yeah, no, understandable. I mean, obviously, again, as I mentioned, one of the also names that has been mentioned is Fulham's Tosin Adarabioyo. I think he's got the 1 year left on his contract there. When you look at the fact what we've got less than a fortnight from that Brentford game, would you have any hesitancy putting in one of those defenders with Christian Romero for the opening game?
Look, if you get Van de Ven, then he comes in straight, slots alongside. Tosin, physical, very physical defender. You know, he spent a lot of his time. He's growing up and evolving. I don't know, and I haven't seen enough. This is the problem of him. I didn't watch Fulham too often. I mean, you don't, do you? You only watch certain teams. But look, he's obviously a proven Premier League player, and he's strong, and he has that. And I think he hopefully has the right footballing intelligence, because that's what matters more than anything else, to know where to be. I mean, I wouldn't have been devastated if they'd gone and got Anderson from Palace, in truth. I quite like him. Again, he'd be a short-term 3-year fix, but it would be an upgrade on what the club has got. And I think that's absolutely essential, that the first three in the pecking order, if you except that Romero's one of those, the 2 and 3, or the joint 1 and 3, however you want to play it, have got to be 25%, 30% better than what was there last season. Because what was there last season was simply not good enough to be the starting pair.
Absolutely. I agree. I mean, coming on to some of those players that unfortunately we feel maybe aren't good enough and do need a move away. One of those that's been strongly linked this window is Davinson Sanchez. We understand there's been a few proposals on the table. There's been interest, we understand, from Forest, from Galatasaray, from Spartak Moscow. I know Spurs seem very keen to do a deal, of course, to get him over to Russia. But look, I think...
I don't know how they could possibly sell him to Spartak Moscow. Because they couldn't take the money. The club's sanctioned. All Russian sporting entities are sanctioned. So, because they're owned by members of the government in the main. So they couldn't take the money. I just think the government would have lent on them and said, no, you can't have it. Anyhow, doesn't surprise. I don't think Sanchez wants to go there. I can't think why that.
Again, I just wonder, do you feel the club are under increasing pressure to try and get these players out the door? I mean, you've already mentioned them, the likes of Japhet Tanganga, Joe Rodon. I mean, do you think we will see these 3 players leave the club by the end of the window?
I think they have to. Simple as that. There's no point in carrying 3 players who aren't good enough. You don't see proper clubs with choices 3, 4 and 5 who aren't good enough to play. Choices 3, 4 and 5, at least 2 of them should be good enough to play for most of the teams in the top division if you are a top club. Now, you could say, well, look at Liverpool. They're 3, 4 and 5 aren't. Well, that's because Liverpool aren't as good as they were. Look at Manchester City. They're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 could all play at centre-half, could play in the Premier League. They're probably going to sell Laporte, who has been a key part for a couple of years of the best team in the country, because they're upgrading with Gvardiol, and they've got Akanji, and they've got this rejuvenated Stones, etc. And they've got Diaz. So players who would be good enough to start for Manchester City are going to be sold because of the quality that they've got. Now, actually, Laporte wouldn't be a bad one if you could get him, because he's left-sided, and he might be available. I don't know now. Let's have a look at that potentially, and that may be something that comes in the next 2 weeks, not now.
Yep, I agree. I just wonder, again, there is obviously that notion that Spurs typically ask Martin for really high prices, and that's why it's really hard to move defenders on. Look, you've been around football for a long, long time, covered it extensively as a journalist. Again, isn't it important to also remember that point that certain players are quite happy to remain at a football club and also are not really always pushing for a move to always be a first-team player? Do you think that's also part of the problem at Tottenham, where it is so comfortable, it is such a nice training ground, it is London, and effectively it is really hard to sometimes move these players out the door? They've got to want to go to wherever that bid is coming from, right?
Yeah, look, the reality is that even though Spurs aren't the biggest players, they've still got the 6th highest wage bill in the country. So therefore, most of the players in that squad are getting more money from Tottenham than they would get anywhere else, because they're being paid Tottenham wages. And they may not be being paid Man City wages or Man United wages or Chelsea wages or Liverpool wages, but they are being paid wages way above what anybody else can afford to pay. Certainly in the Premier League, in the main, and maybe one or two, there'll be a handful of clubs across Europe. How many Italian teams could actually pay what Spurs are paying? The clubs haven't got any money. Outside of 2 clubs in Spain, who can afford to pay what Spurs are paying? Maybe Atletico Madrid. That's it. How many teams in Germany? Well, 1, because Dortmund don't pay the sort of money that Spurs pay. Yeah. So there aren't that many options for them. So then they need to be persuaded that they need to go, and you find a way. You have to pony up a couple of million to persuade them to go. That's the nature of the beast. But also, you don't. If you're looking to get rid of if you're looking to sell players, you don't put the price too low, because you want to try and maximise your return on them. So it then becomes an auction. It becomes a negotiation. So, well, we want to pay 12, or we want 20 for him. Well, and you end up having a negotiation and agree somewhere between 14 and 18, depending on who's more desperate to get the player or get rid of the player. That's the way business works, isn't it? There's no surprise in that. What do you get for Tanganga? 10, 12, if you're lucky.
If you're lucky,
maybe 8.
Yeah.
Rogan, 3. Sanchez, well, maybe 10, 11, 12. I'm not sure. So you get maybe 20 in for the 3 of them, which is all right, and you can actually bank every penny of it because of the length of contract and the time they've served at the club and all of that. So for FFP, that's actually quite nice, full book value, as it were, because you don't have to worry about what's overdue in the amortization.
Yeah.
But there's too many of those players across the entire squad, aren't there?
Absolutely. Yeah. Again, I like you said, I mean, you have to feel some of those players are going to have to move on this window. And this is the one thing I've got to say with Spurs, that, when you look at, and you described it really well, Martin, Liverpool, Chelsea, Arsenal, City, United, I don't know any club that have had players on their books like Spurs have had over the course of the last 7, 8, 9 years. And some of them are really, really good pros. I must say that. Someone like Ben Davies gets a lot of stick by Spurs fans for maybe not being good enough. But I mean, the argument is that I think you made that point that some of these players come in, they do give their all. I just question whether their all now is good enough for where Spurs want to go and want to be. And again, I think this will be an interesting period now for Ange Postecoglou. He's taken away a lot of that squad on the pre-season. He'll have a good idea of the ones he wants to keep and the ones he wants to sell. And I think, again, look, we'll get a really good idea, I think, again, with the Shakhtar Donetsk game as to who is involved and who isn't involved. And I think, again, you'll get even a more clearer indication who exactly is in his plans and who isn't in his plans. I think it's fair to say one area which, again, we're dominated by players is at wing-back and full-back. We've got Jed Spence, Sergio Reguilon, Ryan Sessegnon, Ivan Perisic, Destiny Udogie, of course, has just come through the door. I mean, it's again another area where there's a lot of players there, Martin. Only 2 can play, of course, in a game. Generally, out of the players I've read to you there, who do you think will be a Spurs player out of them come the end of this window at the moment?
Porro, Emerson, Davis, Udogie. I think those 4 will definitely be playing be at the club for different reasons.
Okay.
I think he has to take a view on Spence. Sessegnon will be at the club, but will probably not be in the squad because of the injury, because I don't think he's going to be guaranteed being fit before the end of December. So there's no point in putting him in the squad if he's not going to be fit. I get rid of Reguilon tomorrow because he's not done enough and it's time to move him on. And I actually, if you had to keep Perisic, I wouldn't be broken. But if you were told that he had to go, neither would I be broken. It wouldn't be terrible if he was the 25th man in the squad, because he can play either side.
Of course, yeah.
He is a talented player. He doesn't have to go. He wouldn't want to play every match. He knows he wouldn't play every match.
Yep.
But he might be quite good in the last 20 to bit a bit of calmness into a game and maybe see out a match occasionally, because he's an experienced, wise head, and he contributes the odd assist and goal. Fewer than I thought he would do last season. That's because delivery wasn't really great from the flanks enough, was it, all season? I don't think.
No,
I expected a bit more from him, I have to say.
Agreed.
But I wouldn't be. I'm not booting him out the door. But if he wants to go out the door, I'll leave it open, as it were. I'm not gonna bar the door against him. No. But if no one comes in and he stayed, I wouldn't be screaming and shouting about that. But I can't see any point in Reguilón being at the club at all. I think, and Spence, if anyone knows whether Spence is good enough, great, because we haven't seen enough to see, have we? We haven't seen him kick a ball in his Spurs shirt, really.
This is the thing I was going to ask you about Spence. Is it one of those where, again, Conte made that point very, very clearly, which you could argue was the beginning to the end when he was asked on the signing of Jed Spence. And that was the first time I think all Spurs fans thought, okay, this might not be a great season here, because that was at the point where he was asked about the signing of Jed Spence, and whilst he was in agreement that he agreed to the signing, he made it very abundantly clear on more than one occasion it was a club signing. We had that on a number of occasions, the same as Danjuma was a club signing. Do you think Spence just needs a good couple of loans of him? Because again, this is a player that was coming really highly rated from, I think, Forest, where, look, there was competition for his signature. We've got to say there was genuine competition for his signature that summer. Do you think he needs a couple of loans, Martin, before we really get to see the player he is? Because it's, as we've said, there's real competition there for places in those areas now.
Well, he has to be fit first. That's it. He went away and got injured when he was playing for Rennes. He played a few games and then got injured. He then missed the under-21s, which he was due to play in because of the injury. The Spence that we saw at Forest that season, albeit in the Championship and in the Cup run, looked like a fantastic asset. Exactly what you want. Aggressive, attacking fullback in the traditions of the club. You want attacking fullbacks. That's really, who can get forward and hurt teams. The best Spurs team of the last 10 years had two flying fullbacks in Walker and Rose, although they were played as wing backs, but they were attacking fullbacks in the main. And then they reverted to a form, they were back as being fullbacks again. But even then, with a holding midfielder who allowed them to bomb on. So he looked as though he would be a player in that mould. But clearly things didn't work out last season. And the thing he needs above all is to be playing football. Now, if you've signed a player believing he's a 10-year player for the club potentially, and it takes 18 months for him to develop, well, remember, look how long it took Kyle Walker to develop. He went on loan back to Sheffield, and then he had a loan spell at QPR, didn't he? And a loan spell at Villa, I think. And then he was ready to play for Spurs. So maybe with Spence, it's the same. But nobody knows, because it's all well and good doing well as he did in the Championship. But it is a huge step up. And he hasn't taken that step up because he hasn't had the chance to take that step up. Now, it may be that Postecoglou looks at him and thinks, actually, yeah, I like him. And I think I can do something with him. And let's keep him, because I want to spend the first 6 weeks getting to know him and getting inside him, and then get him into the team and give us an option, which could mean Porro playing further up. It could mean thinking long-term about Emerson. I mean, I quite like Emerson defensively. I just wouldn't want him across the halfway line. But he even did that more effectively. And watching on the tour, he's even playing 1-2s with Sanchez, which is unbelievable. So,
yeah.
And I think he's one of those players who definitely changed minds last season, Emerson, didn't he?
Yeah, he did, 100%. Unbelievable transformation of a player.
Actually.
Yes,
he's
totally
still
agree.
the same player, but he actually tried. When others weren't, it seemed, trying as hard, he was. And when he got injured, it was a miss, which no one would have thought beforehand. So with Spence, I think it's awful. Like, what are the consequences of the Chinese Revolution? It's too early to say. You know, I mean, we just don't know whether he's able to do it or not. And if that means sending him out on loan for 6 months again, preferably in the Premier League, to actually see what he can do against the best players, even if that means going back to Forest on loan or going to Luton, it doesn't matter. Just play football. Just play football. And then you can have a look and make a decision. But at the moment, I defy anyone to tell me that they think he's either good or not good enough, because there's no evidence to base it on. It's just a hunch. And I think, you know, you should always actually have evidence to back up your opinion rather than just a hunch, although hunches can work.
Yeah, I mean, another player that, look, I don't want to go too hard on him because, again, he is injured and he's had a really difficult time at the football club. And that's not me excusing some of the performances. That's Ryan Sessegnon. Just feel like, for whatever reason, Martin, can't put my finger on it, obviously hasn't worked here. And I feel like for him, probably it's best he does restart somewhere else once he can get, obviously, back into some form of, you know, recovery and hopefully, you know, try and restart his career somewhere where he is, in the most polite way, appreciated as well. I just feel with Spurs fans that, you know, a player that's kind of stop-start, hasn't really ever got going, never been able to play
There were moments last year. He scored that first goal of the season, didn't he? Against
he did.
Southampton. Scored a really important goal at Bournemouth to start the comeback.
Yeah, agree.
And then got injured.
Yeah.
And then didn't quite. And it's like, frustration, because I look at him and think he's still a bit too callow. I expect you've got to have a degree of sheer physicality to be more robust to play in the Premier League. That doesn't mean you can't be a skilled player, but you have to be more robust. You have to be able to take the knocks. And I always felt he was hesitant at times.
I agree.
The goal he scored against Southampton, he wasn't hesitant.
No, agree.
He actively attacked the back post. And you know, if you look at some of his performances last season, you think there's a player there. But arguably, the club has bought a better player. That's the belief, certainly, in Udogie.
Yeah.
If you've got Udogie and you've got Davis and you may keep Perisic, you don't need 4.
No, you don't.
So Sessegnon would be the obvious one too many.
Yeah.
And even if you've got 2, do you really need 3? You know, it's because David, unless both of them get injured and then you're really unlucky. But you can always, if you had to, spin Emerson over to right back, for example.
Yeah,
so
left back,
for example, it wouldn't be great going forward, but he's not great going forward at right back, so it doesn't really make a lot of difference. So for me, once fit, you would probably say, okay, in January, we maybe get rid of it. But that's why I would say you keep him at the club because no one will take him now.
No, yeah.
But he wouldn't be in my 25 because I don't think he's going to play.
Listen, I agree. Yeah. I mean, again, a player that's had a really stop-start time at the football club, and you just feel for him, he obviously maybe needs that move. Look, you know, in terms of the midfield area, Spurs, of course, have got their, you would say, probably priority target in this window in James Maddison. We have seen some other links to midfielders that could be dependent, of course, on maybe, as you mentioned, where Pierre-Emile Højbjerg does end up. It appears Atletico Madrid are in talks. They're keen on his signature. He, of course, from what we understand, wants to play Champions League football next season. I will ask you the question, with Højbjerg departing, you've already made the point, you feel Spurs will need to bring in another midfielder. I'm keen to ask you whether you feel doing that, does that stunt the progression of Pat Matar, who I do really, really like as a player? You know, we've only seen him on a handful of occasions. He's looked really impressive during pre-season. You made a great point that, of course, the AFCON will be taking place in the middle of the season, which is going to affect Tottenham, of course. Do you feel on that basis they'll still look to get in a midfielder, despite, of course, wanting to see a progression from Sarr potentially?
I think you want to have 5. You want to have 5 options in midfield who can play, because there may be games when you play Maddison's slightly different role, not as a 10 or not as a point man in the midfield, but with a 2 runners and a holder in midfield, and Maddison further up, or maybe he's injured and doesn't play. You need to have those options. A lot of expectation and scrutiny on Bissouma this season because he was a joke last year. He didn't play. I don't know what was wrong. He came in late. didn't seem ever to fit, and didn't seem to feel wanted, didn't have the fitness. But the player we saw at Brighton is a top player. And if he can be that player, and suggestions from pre-season were that he started to look that player, then that will be a huge bust. Bentancur fit makes a huge difference. His absence was critical. If he stayed fit last season, they would not have finished 8th. No matter how much of a mess the club was, they would have finished in the top 6 with Bentancur fit for the last 4 months of the season, because he makes other players better around him, and the mood within the team would have been better. I think there's a lot of faith internally in Oliver Skipp. I'm not sure I necessarily share it, but his commitment to the team is unquestioned. Sarr looks as he could be a potentially good player. A couple of games last season I was very impressed when he came good and came strong and didn't let them down, but he's still quite young. But you want another if Højbjerg goes, you need a 5th. So that for me is just someone else who can play, who can maybe hold, who can possibly be a runner, etc. You need to have those. Remember, you've got 9 on the bench as well. It's not just an 11-man game. It's you've got 9 on the bench. You want at least 2 midfielders on the bench, because there's always going to be injuries and suspensions ruling players out. After the first 3 weeks of the season, you're going to be players missing for a variety of reasons. So you need to have more options. And I think 5's a good number of out-and-out midfielders who are running midfielders, as opposed to, Maddison is he's a 10. He's the first one they've had at the club since Ericsson. And it's been a criminal absence in the squad ever since Ericsson left.
Of course, I agree. I think again, Maddison's a player.
The argument would be, well, hang on, you haven't mentioned Lo Celso and Ndombele, who of course are back. What I'm hearing is that most people were really quite impressed with Lo Celso on the tour, that he played extremely well. Too late, I think, because I think he's done nothing in his time at the club to suggest that he really cares. And as I've said before on this, I cannot believe that a professional footballer is incapable of getting through 60 minutes. And that's the Ndombele situation. He's just not fit. And I don't understand. How can you be a professional footballer and not be able to last a game? That's your job. It's a bit like me stopping halfway through a match report because I'm tired. Now, there are those who would say, actually stop it before it starts. But that's not the point. It's your job. It's your job. Do it. Be able to do it, and you can't. It's bonkers.
The thing is that we saw initial reports, Martin, that he was really a fan, Postecoglou, of just the early days of Ndombele. Obviously, he had him fairly early because he was one of those obviously non-internationals, and obviously, look, he's picked up an injury during the preseason, which obviously hasn't helped him. Do you think now, given what we've got, 2 preseason games left, do you think the time is running out to impress? Do you think Ange will need to get rid of him because we're just going to be overstocked in that midfield? Also, when you factor in if they want to keep Lo Celso as well, can you see a situation where he still stays, given the time we're up against here and he's not played?
I look, about to be proven really wrong, but no, I can't. I just don't see. I've been really disappointed because I thought when they signed him, it was going to be a massive signing.
Agree.
Really excited about it. I'd seen him play. I thought, yes, this is exactly what Tottenham need. And of course, he scored on his debut, didn't he, against Villa?
Yeah.
And he scored that incredible goal at Sheffield United. Fantastic goal.
Amazing goal.
How many games that would you come away with saying he's played really well? You don't need a hand, do you? You don't need a full hand to work out the number of games he's played.
No, you don't. And that's the worry, isn't it? A player that, I think he's still the club's record signing, unbelievably, for the price. It's such a disappointment. I mean, I must ask you, there have also been a few tentative links with Conor Gallagher of Chelsea, where I have to say Conor Gallagher has said he would love to play under Maurizio Pochettino. He's very keen to do that. We've seen Bristol City's Alex Scott, who we understand is now the subject of a £25 million bid from Bournemouth. We understand those talks are advanced. And one name that has cropped up yet again during this window, one that seems to crop up every window, is Frank Kessie, who apparently is, again, of interest to Tottenham. Can you see any of those plausible players come into the club? Martin, what do you reckon?
Look, they're clearly looking at options. I think Kessie might be the easiest one to get because of Barcelona's finances, to be honest. They really are in a mess for a variety of reasons and have to get money in. and it still won't do any good, actually, because they got a looming crisis coming at them, which will be imminent in the next 15 months or so, which will cause chaos there. But that's another story. But again, if you do get Kessie in, guess what happens in January? So there is that balance to the equation, because you're going to lose Sarr, you're going to lose Pasuma. If you lose Kessie as well, then you're down to Skip and Bentancur, and maybe like if he stays Lo Celso. So I don't know is the answer. You want someone who can sit in front. Gallagher is a runner. I mean, I was interested in that game for England against Italy in March last year, when he came on for the last 20, where England were right under the cosh, and he transformed the momentum of the game just because of his energy. Because he suddenly was chasing everything down, and Italy, who were knocking the ball about, couldn't knock the ball about anymore because he was running and running and running, and he did really well. And he had a very good season at Palace, whereas last season he had moments, but they didn't last very long at Chelsea. And I think they're looking to get rid, because they've got to raise money, because they spent too much again over the last few years, particularly over the last 12 months. And remember, the new rules for UEFA on accounting, even though Chelsea aren't in Europe either, started this January. So you're only allowed to spend, if you're in European competition, 90% of your revenues on wages and on transfers this year, 80% next year, 70% the year after. So that's why Chelsea need to sell, because they spent money on ludicrously number of players, and some of them I don't think are very good, but that's another. That's certainly overpaid for them, but overpaying is something that everyone does in football, so be it. But I do think that the Kessie one might be, even though that does leave the dilemma, as we said, in January.
Yeah. It's interesting, Nick, because again, we shall see. I think it'll become a lot clearer with relation to where Spurs do go on that Pierre Højbjerg situation with Atletico Madrid. Do you think that's a good move for him, Martin Højbjerg? Because again, I think that's a player that has really divided opinion at Tottenham. There was some that will feel that Højbjerg was a real warrior, gave everything. For me, I think, the problem is he was overworked. He was given far too many jobs and wasn't really given the opportunity to stick to the one job. And I've got to say, I think he leaves Tottenham under a bit of a cloud than what maybe he should have done, because I think what I will say about him as an individual is I know that when I've watched him, he's given his everything. I don't think he's been lazy. I think he worked very, very hard for the football club. He's one that ultimately I just feel now we do probably need an upgrade on. He's probably reached the level of where he can go, and Spurs now playing a much more free-flowing, adaptive brand of football, expansive. He probably isn't suited to the Ange system. What's your take on Højbjerg and whether you thought it's the right time to go for him?
Well, again, if he were to go, he would go with my blessing. I think he's had a very good few years at the club. I don't think anyone can question his desire, his commitment, his effort. He's not always played well, but no one can always play well. And he's also scored some pretty important goals for the club. And he cares, no question. And so were he to stay, again, okay, great. Because you know what you're going to get. You're only, on a bad day, he's 6. And on a good day, he's 8. Now, is that good enough? Well, I think sometimes it's good to have someone you know is going to give you an average of 7 out of 10 every game, because at least you've got certainty there. Davis is another one who, when you need him, if you play him, you know what you're going to get. You know exactly what you're going to get every game. And he's never going to let you down for effort. He might occasionally make mistakes, but he's also totally committed to the cause. So that's what you want from players. But if I'm Højbjerg and you've got the chance to play Champions League and get a bump up, an extra bit of money out of Atletico, having done, he's played for Bayern Munich, he's played for Southampton, he's played for Spurs. He maybe wants to try a bit of life in Spain, which is a great lifestyle. And Madrid's a fantastic city. Don't pretend otherwise. And it's a club. Let's be fair. If there is a player who's in the image of Diego Simeone, it's probably Højbjerg,
isn't it just? Isn't it just?
It's his father's son almost, isn't it?
It's unbelievably, yeah.
You could see exactly why he'd be wanted by Atletico. Yeah. and fair play. If the bid comes in at the right sort of money, which would probably be 30 odd, then okay, as long as you buy someone to replace, that's fine. It'll be, but I'm not saying get him out of the club. I don't believe that for one moment. But I do think, I said, if he goes, I would say, well, thank you for your service, because I think he's actually done a really good job. And also, if he does go for 30, that's pretty much virtually all banked by Spurs, because they paid 13 for him 3 years ago. So if you amortize that, I mean, that's virtually pure profit.
Yeah, if anyone loved the transfer like that, it'd be Daniel Levy. Profit like that, and you'd hope, hopefully, they're going to reinvest that in other areas and our centre back. Right. Well, we have come to that time of the show. We've kept Martin longer than what we said we were going to, but with Tottenham and us talking, it always happens that way. If Martin's okay, we are going to go for our final break of the show, and Martin knows what's coming, and I know what's coming. It's the Harry Kane conversation. And I must say again, thank you so much for listening, watching us here live. There's over 1,500 of you that are checking out, listening to Last One Spurs, watching Last One Spurs right now. Thank you so much for all your incredible support for the show. We're joined by the brilliant chief football reporter, Martin Lipton, back on Last One on Spurs. One man that always talks about Spurs so well. Martin, thank you so much. I'm taking you to extra time. And I'm not topping it up as they're going to do this season, as we've seen the Premier League announcing those new rules. Well, there will be time added on. We could be in that stadium for God knows 2 hours now. But listen, let's hope the football will be a lot more enjoyable. Imagine them doing that during the Conte era or the Nuno era, putting us through 2 hours. My God, it's going to be exciting. It's going to be Ange Ball. Right, let's discuss a man's future that has dominated this transfer window. Martin, I think we are all tired. We all want a swift conclusion either way. Harry Kane. Well, I think it was billed, Martin, as being a big week for Tottenham, big week for Harry Kane. There was, of course, this meeting that was going to take place on Monday, which did happen between Daniel and a couple of the Bayern hierarchy, you'd say, technical directors, where it appeared that essentially, well, according to reports, it looked like a formality. Bayern were going to stump up the money. Harry was going to be a Bayern Munich player. And I think the element of it was, how are Spurs going to recover and then find a way forward? We are recording, and I will date check this and time check it as well. We're the 2nd of August. It's 21:42 UK time. And we're nowhere near closer to establishing or knowing whether Harry Kane will be a Spurs player by the end of this window or will make that move to Bayern Munich. So, Martin, as a man that's been a journalist for many, many years, and I won't reveal how long because I want to keep you young, where do you think we stand on this Harry Kane situation?
I think it really does come down to whether Bayern Munich are serious, because the price is on the table. If you try to undercut, I don't think Tottenham are going to sell. I think if they did put £100 million on the table for a player who is out of contract in 1 year's time and will be available on a free, there is a commercial rationality about selling. I don't want it to happen, by the way. I would rather take the risk that he goes for free. But it's not my money. So it's easy for me to say that.
Yeah.
I would like to think, it was really interesting, the stuff that came out yesterday, which Dan Kilpatrick did in the stand-in and is followed up by a couple of others, which, whilst I don't know who Dan talks to, I'm pretty clear where this story has come from. He hasn't made it up. This has come from a particular corner, and it's not within the club. Let's put it in those terms. So clearly, there are two interpretations of this story that Kane says if he doesn't get sold by the Brentford game, he stays for the season. One is, and that he might consider signing a new deal. One is that he doesn't really want to go. That in his heart of hearts, he would love to stay and win something at Tottenham. And he will give Tottenham one last chance to prove to him that he can win something at Tottenham. That might not necessarily be this season, but that what he sees this season is enough to make him believe that it will come, that the end product of what's going on under the new manager is at last the success that he craves, because what he wants to do more than anything is to win a trophy in a Spurs shirt. The alternative reading is that he's trying to put the hurry up on Daniel Levy and make Daniel do a deal now, because otherwise he will walk out on a free, whether it means signing a free contract on January 1 or at the end of the season. That's which of those I'd like to think it's the former. But I don't know. I can't get inside Harry Kane's head. What I think it would be great would be to see him wearing a Spurs shirt this season, come what may. Even if he said, this will be my last season, but I want to go out on a high. I don't think there's a single Tottenham fan who should begrudge him that, because he has carried the club on his shoulders for 10 years, or best part of 10 years. He's been arguably, if not de facto, the greatest player in Tottenham history. He hasn't won anything, but my word, what has he done? He's the greatest goal scorer in terms of goals scored in the club's history. He's England's greatest goal scorer. He will score, I suspect, another 30 goals for England. He will, if he stayed in the Premier League, he would score another 100 goals in his Premier League career. Because Shearer, from this age, scored 86 more goals over 6 seasons, and whoever Kane played for will be a better team than the teams that Shearer was playing for in the last 6 years of his career. And also, he's never needed pace. It's not about pace. He's got enough pace, but it's about everything else in his game. So he will destroy all the Premier League records. He will destroy, he's already destroyed, and will bat out of any chance of it being broken, the England goal scoring record. I think if he were to set a new Premier League scoring mark, it will be a record that will last for perpetuity, because I don't think in the future players will stay that long in the league. So I think he got the chance to do that. And I think in his heart of hearts, I'd love to think that's what he wants to do. But also, he wants to win something. And if he goes to Bayern Munich, he's guaranteed to win the Bundesliga. I mean, they won it last year when they were rubbish. I know. And they still won it on the final day of the season because Dortmund imploded and all they had to do was win at home. Yeah. So knowing that, and he wants to win something, and maybe it could be a 2-year buyback. He comes back to Tottenham, Sheringham style return for the last 3 years of his career. Maybe that's something that might be cooked up as part of a deal. I don't know. But what I do think is absolutely imperative is that there is clarity. And I don't mean actually by the Brentford game. I think it should be decided on Sunday. Either he plays against Shakhtar Donetsk and it's made clear by the manager that he's here for the season, or he doesn't play and doesn't play again, which would be an awful thing to see, but that's what happens. And at least then the manager has certainty over what his squad is going to be, what his attacker is. He can go out and prioritise whoever he wants to sign. And if that means waiting, getting one in, it might be Gift Urban or whoever, and then having a go at getting Tony in for January. I don't know, whatever it might be, do something and know that he's not. The one thing you don't need if you're Postecoglou is, well, I don't know whether he's going to be available or not. No, just you need to know. You need to know for at least the week before the season starts. And I think we're in this position. Look, if the club had, if we'd won one of those finals or converted one of those champions title runs when we finished second or third, we wouldn't be here, because he wouldn't have left the club. He wouldn't be thinking about leaving Tottenham. No, the statue will come anyhow, and it should do. He's been outstanding, and last season, Haaland got the Golden Boot and all the accolades. 30 goals for that Tottenham team was, for me, the individual performance of the entire season.
Phenomenal. Phenomenal.
Because he was surrounded by a load of rubbish, by a team that was falling apart and a manager that was imploding the squad. The player who's always been reliable alongside him wasn't fit. Now we know Son was playing with a hernia all season. And hopefully that'll be okay. Richarlison couldn't score a goal. I think actually Richarlison will be quite good this season. I think he'll come good and he'll score. But he won't score 30. If Richarlison's the main striker, he might get 20.
Yeah.
In a good season. And there's an argument that he's maybe more suited for a high press than Kane. I don't care what system you play. Whatever system you play, Harry Kane will score goals.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree.
You know, some people get up and for them what's natural is to eat breakfast and have a cup of coffee. For Harry Kane, what's natural is to score goals at the highest level. He was born to do it. It's what he does. And you don't want to lose that. Of course you don't. But if you have to, then do it now. Don't vacillate. Don't wait till bail on the last day of the window. Do it now.
You know, mine, we have been here so many times, it feels, as Spurs fans, when we've seen a player's future dominate and overshadow the start of the season. You mentioned Gareth Bale there. You know, you look at Luka Modric, if you remember that situation. Look, different periods of the season, Berbatov, Keane departing the football club, the Fraser Campbell deal, which, again, I saw links the other day to, of course, the young Bayern Munich forward, Matthias Tell, and I was just thinking, this is Fraser Campbell Mark II. It worries me that we're in this situation now and why this couldn't have been addressed at the first point, you know, the first week after the Leeds game, end of the season, why this wasn't done then, and how we've allowed the situation to carry on into where we are now, and there hasn't been some form of a deadline on it. You've made the point, and I agree with you that, look, I think if we come to the end of the weekend and Harry's in that Shakhtar Donetsk squad, for me, that should be foregone conclusion. Harry's a Spurs player, end of. And look, we'll have to see what January brings. But I want to ask you as a journalist what you've made of Bayern Munich's approach during this summer. Because it feels there's just an air of arrogance to say, we get Harry Kane. We'll get Harry. It almost is though Tottenham are, in the most polite way I say this, are nothing in this situation. And they can trample over us and take Harry. And it's looking like now, really, that the fee that was being banded around, only appears from the outside looking in, that it's not as a full conclusion as what it was with the arrogance and the way they were approaching the situation. What have you made of Bayern's conduct throughout the summer?
Bayern Munich think that everyone is Borussia Dortmund and will just roll over when they say jump, or that makes no sense at all, roll over when they tell them to. Because that happens in Germany, because they're just, you know, one of the reasons, of course, is they bailed out Dortmund when they were going bust a few years ago, and they basically got the power to do whatever they want. Well, they haven't got that power with Premier League clubs. They can't tell Tottenham how much they're going to pay for a player. They have to agree a fee. And if they don't agree the fee, they're not going to get the player. It's as simple as that. And I think some of the stuff that came out from Hoeneß in particular was unbecoming of a proper football club. I thought it was beyond disrespectful. I thought it was entirely wrong. And were I Daniel Levy, I would have said, well, no matter what you offer, not a bloody chance. Because that's pretty much what happened 2 years ago with City when they took the Mickey and it appeared, tried to persuade Kane to play up and force his way out. Now, Kane has not done that this time, has he? There's no question about his behaviour. He went on the tour. He played in the games on the tour. He scored in the games on the tour. He's shown nothing, no signal that he's looking to get out. That doesn't mean he won't go if it happens, if a deal is done, but he doesn't appear to be pushing it as he might have done. Bayern's behaviour has been wrong from start to finish. I think they just assume that because they're Bayern Munich, they can get what they want because that's what they're used to. And they may have bitten off rather more than they can chew with this. And I think it may make it quite interesting when there's future meetings of the ECA, what Daniel's position will be with Bayern. And also remember that Bayern have got a new chief exec because Kahn's been booted. So the new fella's trying to prove how strong he is. And a new sporting director because Salihamidzic also went at the end of last season. And Tuchel's playing up and making demands. and they're trying to give Tuchel what he wants, and they want to be seen to be delivering for Tuchel. And I think they just overplayed their hand, and they've used the German media as mouthpieces to a degree, which is what happens. And look, blimey, other clubs in other countries do that. We're not. It's not just a German thing. It happens here and in France and in Spain and in Italy. It's how the media operate with clubs. So let's not be holier than thou about it. But I do think they've misjudged the dynamic of the situation. They misjudged the approach of Daniel Levy, and they've also misjudged Harry Kane. That doesn't mean he won't go, but they've taken it for granted that he just wants to play for Bayern Munich. And I'm not sure that's true.
It's fascinating again because from the outside looking in, just the way in which they've approached it. You say there for Harry. Again, is it convenience, Martin, that Bayern are just the club Bayern are the club that are showing encouragement they want Harry right now? Because I still can't square this in my mind with Harry. And I know friend of the show, Alistair Gold, says a very similar line that I can't understand the obsession of moving this summer right now for Harry. Because I think I look at Harry's situation. In 12 months, he can go wherever he wants to go. He could go to Chelsea, dare I say, enjoy Maurizio, if he's still there, I have to say. He could go to Manchester United, he could go to Man City, obviously, with Haaland. If Haaland does move on to Real Madrid, potentially, I look at that as an option. Do you understand the obsession of moving this window? Does that tell us a lot about how much he just wants to get away from Tottenham? Or is it a fact that he might be concerned that, look, injuries can happen at any time during a career? He's seen his good friend Ryan Mason suffer a really, really bad career-ending injury. Is it that he just wants to win and it's irking him when he's on that England duty and those players around him are all winners? And dare I say, even Declan Rice now who's moved down the road, even he's won a trophy. Is it just now an obsession? I have to win. I need to win. And it has to be imminent.
Well, maybe look, that may be a factor. The other thing, of course, is he's shown so much to Tottenham, so much loyalty over the years. Ridiculous story that he'll make up the difference because no one's going to, that he'll pay 20 million to go. Are you sure? Why would he do that? If he goes, it's for the money. He's not going to give up money to go for money. That makes no sense whatsoever. And a bit of it is if he goes now, he knows that Tottenham will make a lot of money. Tottenham will make the money because, again, if he goes for 80, 90, 100 million, whatever it is, that's pure profit. That's if he goes in a year's time, he goes for nothing. It's all for him. So if anything, if he were to leave now, he gets less than if he hangs on. Because if he goes in next summer on a free, he can ask for 30 million signing on fee plus 300,000 a week, and someone will pay it. They just will. Whether that be Manchester United, Chelsea, Barcelona, whomever, he could get what he wants. So by going now, he won't get that size of signing on fee, and he may get the salary, but he's actually going to earn less money than if he goes next summer, if he goes at all. And, were he to stay and they were to win something, I think he would sign a new deal. They won the League Cup. I think he signed a new contract at Spurs. Because he's won something at Tottenham.
Yeah.
And he sees out his career at Tottenham, does 5 more years at Tottenham and scores another 100 goals and maybe win something else because once they win the first thing, it becomes easier, doesn't it?
You've said that on here so many times. Yeah, you've said that on a numerous amount of occasions. If they win the one, there'll be more to follow. They've got to win the one. We were still waiting for them to win the one. That's the bloody problem. All right, let me ask you, hunch. Look, you've been in and around the industry for a long time.
Honestly, I don't know is the answer.
You don't know. You really don't. I mean, no, not even in like an expert view, but from what you gauge, you still think it's very hard from an opinion perspective to kind of call it. Is it that if it can go either way still at the moment?
I think it all depends on the offer from Bayern Munich.
Yep.
If they make an offer that Tottenham accept, which I think will be in excess of £90 million, probably 95, I think they'd sell. But while they continue to offer less than 80, there's no way they're going to sell. And if they continue playing silly games, it makes it even less likely. And there is now a deadline of sorts, it seems, set by Kane. He's basically saying, we'll sort it out, but sort it out now. Now, I said, I bring it forward to Sunday, but that's just me. And it's not my money, and it's not my choice, and it's not. I'm not in a position to do that. But I do think that it's I genuinely think anyone who tells you they know, unless their name is Harry Kane, and I don't think even he knows, they're lying, because no one knows. And I'm not sure. But I'm not sure that Bayern Munich really want to pay the money it will take to get him out. And if they're not really willing to pay the money, then he won't go.
It's fascinating. It is finally poised. We shall see. Look, Martin, final question of what's always a fascinating time we get you on Last from Spurs. We've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's been over 1,500 of you watching us live here. Thank you so much for all of your incredible support for the show. Loads of lovely comments coming in for you, Martin. They can see the Spurs blood coming through. They really, really can. They can see the years of pain, the years of hurt. So an easy question to end it on, which I want to ask you is, what do you feel would constitute success for Tottenham under Ange Postecoglou for the upcoming season?
Top 5.
You answered that very quick.
And a cup. Only because top 5 probably gets a Champions League spot for the following season. Not necessarily, not definitely. And we may be in the bizarre position of wanting Arsenal and West Ham to do well in Europe to ensure that 5th gets a Champions League spot the following season. Not win, obviously, but go quite deep. Get to the knockout and then get sploshed 6-0 by Bayern Munich, whatever. I don't mind. But
agree.
I think that's realistically, look, and it might be better than that, it might be worse. But what I do want, what will be important is that he gets time to impose his methods, that there isn't a knee-jerk reaction if it doesn't always work from the start, but also that we see a Tottenham team that wants to play attacking, vibrant, forward-thinking, aggressive football. No more of this sitting back on a 1-0 lead if we get one. Certainly no more sitting back on a 0-0 draw. Come on. Play the right way. Now, I think he wants to. I've chatting to the Scottish reporters who dealt with him when he was at Celtic, and they just said he changed the team. He changed the mindset. Remember, they came in having been absolutely sploshed by Rangers the season before with a lot of negativity. Rangers have overtaken us. It's another 5 years before we get back to the top, if that. Who's this Australian? We've got no chance. This is rubbish. It's going to be... And then suddenly, wow, bang. Look at the success. Now, it's harder to be successful coming into a 7-club league, maybe more with Villa. I think Villa could be actually the wild card this season. Genuinely, I think they could be a good team. Rather than a 2-club league. But if he's able to bring that imprint onto the team, preferably keep the striker, get the centre halves, play the football the fans want, the mood within the stadium will be so different. They'll be carried on that because that's important. And teams will start to be worried about Tottenham, which last season, even when they were third, they weren't. I mean, I thought they were getting away with it for the first half of the season, then stopped getting away with it.
Putting it lightly, isn't it? God, geez, getting away with it. I think that's very polite.
But I just assumed they'd eventually start playing, and they didn't. They actually got worse.
Yeah.
Just play the right way, play with that intensity.
Yeah.
And even if they fall short, for the right reasons, people will accept it.
Agree.
They'll want more, but they'll at least accept things are going in the right direction. Last season, hopefully, will be the outlier. It was an abomination of a campaign, rescued only by one player. And without him, it would have finished below Chelsea, and Chelsea were embarrassing last season. And whatever happens, be Tottenham. Remember that DNA. Go back to what Nicholson and Blanchflower said. It's about playing. It's about making people smile. It's about, winning, but it's about how you win. It's about how you play. It's about making the fans go home with a smile because they know that every single player on that pitch has delivered and tried to deliver and wanted to deliver and played with the enthusiasm and passion and desire and heart and soul of the 55,000 in that ground. Because if they do that, even if you fall off the log, no one will criticise you. They might be disappointed at the lack of ability, but if you're giving everything, every game, you don't get the same criticism. You don't get the same disappointment because at least you show you care. And the manager, I think, will make them show they care. Do that. It's a good start, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you've got obviously a lot of exciting now. Potentially, again, this is the thing with Tottenham where, we go through, as you said, those kind of peaks and troughs where we get so disappointed. Then you get a glimmer of hope, and there's just that little bit of excitement, thinking, could we be going for a good time again? Look, we really hope so. I think again, the Ange situation is that he seems like a really genuine, nice bloke, which is a really good place to start. If you can connect with someone on a human level, then that's a great place to begin with, and someone that clearly respects the football club as he does. And I think ultimately, look, isn't it nice, Micky Van de Ven actually wants to be here?
Yeah.
It feels like we've had the last 3-4. I mean, we're asking too much of a manager actually wants to be here. I think the last 3-4 managers have kind of almost in the most politest way, maybe felt like they're doing us a favour to be here. Where look, it's lovely to have someone that wants to be here, right?
There are parallels between him and Pochettino. If you remember, Pochettino wasn't the first choice. Van Gaal was the first choice. Pochettino was the right choice, but he wasn't the first choice. This bloke wasn't the first choice.
Yep.
But he just might be the right choice.
I hope so. Mike, look, I have to give you this opportunity. You've still got a wonderful book that covers all things Tottenham where, look,
not as old as me, but still old.
avid readers love a good read. You've still got a book out. We're going to put it, obviously, in the description of this show where people can find it. But tell us a little bit about that book very quickly before we let you go. Where can people still check out the book you wrote? And it was a wonderful piece that you obviously created.
Yeah, look, it was something I always wanted to do was to write a book, which we prove I can write a bit longer than 600 words or 300 words on the back. And it was a labour of love. And it was basically, I wanted it to be a personal history, but also a history of the club and the ground. It was basically written up to the season after they left White Hart Lane. And some of the predictions I made or hopes and aspirations I made towards the end proved, surprise, surprise, to be somewhat unfortunately incorrect. But there you go. What it's about is what the club means. And part of it was talking to fans and people who work at the ground, as well as ex-players and managers, etc., about what it means to be part of Tottenham, because everyone's part. Yeah, the players are the physical, the visible part. The people who work in the ground are the physical part, but the people who go to the ground are the emotional part. Because without supporters, you haven't got a club. Not every club wins, and it's not just about winning. Because if it's about winning, we'd all support one club. Everyone would support Man City now because they're the best team, and they are the best team. They're a fantastic team. But it's not just about that. And also, sometimes you need the disappointment for the success to really mean something. The game is about glory, yeah, but it's about wanting to feel part. And this is the one thing that really annoys me about certain other clubs, is this idea that they are special. No, Liverpool, this means more. No, it doesn't. It doesn't mean more to Liverpool. It means just the same to everyone. To it means more to. It means more to Luton Town. And it means more to Leicester City. And it meant more because of what they've been through in 2012 to Manchester City. And it would mean more to Tottenham, arguably, after the last few years. Not to Liverpool. They win things all the time. It doesn't mean more. Absolute garbage, in my opinion. It means a lot. It should mean a lot. And Tottenham means a lot to me and my family and the friends I used to go with and the people I talk to about the club. And everyone who's a Spurs fan has the same feelings, the same sense of annoyance and frustration and angst, but also the sense of hope. because it is the hope that keeps you going. It's not like clockwise, it isn't the hope that kills you. Actually, it's the hope that makes you go. It's the hope that makes you turn up at the start of every season, believing it'll be better this time. And last season was very disappointing, but we finished 8th. Now, got to be honest, it wasn't that long ago that 8th would have been the summit of our expectations. Things have changed. Things have moved on, where 8th is a crushing disappointment. But that shows what the club is. And it is in a different place, and it should be in a different place. And we're not signing, without being disrespectful, Ruel Fox. And we haven't got Gary Doherty as our main centre-half and centre-forward occasionally. And we haven't...
Not yet.
And it isn't Stuart Nethercott, not to be dismissive of that. There must have been fantastic players to be in the top division, but come on. Yeah. I mean, it's not Tramezzani again, is it?
Hope not.
I mean, we've had some shockers. Blondell, he was at one, wasn't he?
He was an interesting one. We do pick him. I tell you, we do pick him or find them.
It's just about football. It's part of you. And I'm 56 now. I've never seen Spurs win the league, but I've seen them win cups. My boy's 14. He's desperate to see. He's not seen them win anything because he was -1 when we won the League Cup. So he's desperate to see. And we spend all we ever do is talk about Spurs. As soon as I come downstairs, he comes out, right, Tottenham, what are we talking about? So today it was Van de Ven and it's about Kane and this. It's what we do. We are in the car, going for a walk. The only thing we talk about, apart from his club football, is Tottenham. Yeah. Because we're fans. And everyone who is a fan is, it's like, it isn't life or death. There are more important things than football, but football is the most important of the unimportant things.
Totally agree.
It remains so.
Yeah, it consumes our whole life. It does. Well, a lot of people ask where we can purchase the book. I understand it's still available on Amazon, isn't it, Martin? It's still available on Amazon.
I think so. Yeah, look, to be honest, it was published a few years ago, and I'm not sure where you get it now. There is a paperback version which included an update on the first Wembley season, because of course, by the time I wrote it, we were supposed to be coming in for the start of the next season, which, as we know, didn't actually happen.
We all know what happened there.
But we're there now, and it's still an incredible stadium. Let's not forget that. And I just want a team that's fitting that stadium and that training ground. And I want a manager who wants it as much as I do. And we did in Pochettino. Yep. And I'm hoping, and we did when I was a kid with Nicholson and with Birkinshaw and Pleat. David Pleat was a fantastic manager for Spurs. That team was brilliant to watch. And those who weren't around in the mid-80s, ask those who were about that team and how great a team that was. And we didn't have a team as good as that for nearly 30 years until Pochettino came around. And that Pochettino team was better than the 87 team. And if it had won what it should have won, we'd be in a very different place. But we are where we are. Maybe, let's hope, under this manager, it can happen. That's all I want.
Fingers crossed. Martin,
and if it doesn't, there'll be another manager.
That's probably guaranteed. And that's Tottenham all over. Martin, it has been a fascinating hour and 40 with you. Thank you so much for all your time. Look, I know you're not a mad crazy on social media, but you can check Martin out, of course, at Martin Lipton across Twitter. Definitely get in touch. Look, it's been a fascinating show. Martin, thank you so much for all your time. And let's hope we've got a positive season ahead. Right? God, we're due one, aren't we, Martin? Got to be due.
Come on. It's all right. Let's do it. It's going to be.
Fantastic. In hands we trust. Guys, thank you so much for all your incredible support for Last One on Spurs. We're back from you soon, but from the wonderful Martin Lipton, guys who've been the Last One on Spurs, please as always keep safe, keep well, and as always, come on you Spurs.